I'm really pleased on International Women's Day to be joined by one of our Fed reps from North Wales, Inspector Ceri Hawe. Hi Ceri, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, John. Yourself?
Yeah, really good, thank you, really good. Thanks for joining in on this Zoom chat. Can't wait for things to go back to normal, but we do the best we can in the circumstances. I think it's a really good opportunity to talk to you as a female Fed rep, and I know you've been a Fed rep for about 8 years now, about what role you've done on behalf of the Fed and how big an issue some of the things that you've picked up on behalf of our members have been and the difference that you've made. So, what role have you done on behalf of the Fed and on behalf of our members?
Well, I've been a Fed rep 8 years, like you said. Sort of like the last couple of years, I've took on sort of like the equality lead in North Wales Police. I've got 28 years service this year, and I came to sort of like being a Fed rep not long after I became an inspector. And that was on the back of sort of like other inspectors sort of like asking me to sort of like come along and be a Fed rep, because I'm always keen to sort of like get involved in different things. I'm quite keen to sort of like help people out if I can, if I see something that isn't quite right, and something, you know, that needs addressing. So it was just sort of like a natural progression really for me to do. And it's nice, especially as you go sort of like through the ranks, if you like, sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. And I think with the training and stuff that I've received as a Fed rep, it's maybe better in my day job as well, because you do see things from a different perspective, and things maybe that sort of like would have been relevant for you, but you kind of do forget. So it's good to sort of like represent sort of like colleagues are all different ranks really, because, you know, it does make you better at what you do. And it's nice to be able to support them, because we are here to support members, you know, in their hour of need. And it's quite satisfying. It's nice to sort of like, you know, you get good job satisfaction from it, because there's such a wide variance of things that you get asked to deal with.
Absolutely, and certainly the training that I think we give our Fed reps, it's not really appreciated, I don't think, outside of the organisation, just how brilliant our training is. And it's really good to hear you say, Ceri, as somebody who is a local Fed rep doing the role, saying that the training that you've received and the experiences that you're having are making you a better inspector. And can I just touch on that? As a female inspector, now a Fed rep, well, being a Fed rep for a number of years, I often get some pushback that maybe inspectors, chief inspectors, don't always feel that the Fed is there for them. What's been your experience around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in what you're saying. I think some people think that it can hinder your career if you become a Fed rep. I would sort of challenge that really, because they're all about, you know, in the police forces, about sort of like healthy challenges. The Federation's often described as a critical friend, and I think it's good, you know, that those challenges are put in place. And I think if, you know, we don't want a load of people who say yes to everything if it's not the right thing to do. We're all about doing the right thing. And sometimes, you know, bosses make the wrong decision. And it's quite right that we bring different perspectives. And I think especially at the inspecting level, you know, inspector, chief inspector, you know, they're subject to grievances as well. You know, they can get treated unfairly in the same way that sort of like a new PC can, you know, or a sergeant with 10 years in, you know, so the same sort of issues impact on inspectors and chief inspectors, you know, and I do get, you know, people of my rank and above coming to me for advice. And I think it's important that they sort of like know and understand that we're there to assist them as well. And I think it breaks down barriers too, especially now, you know, on the branch board, sort of like, you know, we are rankless on the branch board, you know, we can represent anybody of any rank, you know, and this morning, for instance, I've been representing a PC in the organisation in relation to a welfare matter. You know, I've represented sergeants, inspectors and chief inspectors. And I think it's important that sort of like we do sort of like represent all ranks. It's quite likely that you probably wouldn't get an inspector, say, go into a PC rep sometimes, but it's good that we've got the different sort of like ranks within our branch board where people can sort of like look at who they want to, you know, to choose to represent them, because sometimes different people have different skill sets, don't they?
No, I agree. And I hope you didn't mind me asking that, but I feel really passionately that all of those within the rank structure that we represent should all feel that we're there for them. And I think it's people like yourself, inspectors, chief inspectors who are reps, who make that more appealing. So thank you. But you're also as well as being a busy Fed rep, you're the equality lead, which is a massive role, And one of the things that I would imagine you pick up an awful lot of is the issue of flexible working. So how big has that issue of flexible working been, particularly for female colleagues?
I think it's really prevalent for female colleagues, especially. Females in the main tend to have the majority of caring responsibilities. I think it's something like 80% of females have caring responsibilities. So that then impacts on their need to have flexible working patterns. As a mother myself, I've got 2 sons, and when I was sort of like I was a custody sergeant and a patrol sergeant, and I had flexible working pattern in place, and that enabled me to still sort of like do the roles that I was enjoying doing, but also sort of like have that flexibility, for the childcare that I needed. And I think that's really important, because it's important for any organisation to have a diverse workforce in all the departments. It's not a tick box, it's not a nice to have, it's an operational necessity, because a blended workforce and different people from different backgrounds, and females very much within that, bring different skill sets, different perspectives, and a better service to everybody. And in the custody arena, for example, you do need female sergeants within that area. Custody role is quite good. I volunteered to go into custody as a female sergeant because it fitted my childcare. In that, on patrol, if you go to a job and you're stuck at a job, you can't leave, can you? So you're quite often sort of like working over and stuff as a patrol sergeant. And for me, I volunteered to go into custody because I saw the benefits of it, and that, like, you're always getting took off by somebody at a particular time, so you can manage your hours better as a custody sergeant. So that really suited me. So I volunteered to go in, and what I found was sort of like females. I represented a female custody sergeant following an organisational restructure where she had a flexible working pattern in place, and then due to the restructure taking place, she was told that they couldn't any longer accommodate a flexible working pattern. So she found herself then displaced and having to find another role. Whereas, if the organisation had thought about it a bit differently and not been so hung up on sort of like staffing levels and looked at the wider organisational benefits of having females in the custody arena, I think it would have been more beneficial for the organisation. And as it was, several female custody sergeants were displaced from custody and had to find other roles. And the particular female that I represented on that occasion, she had caring responsibilities, so she needed a flexible working pattern. They were saying as part of the restructuring that they wanted more females to go in custody, yet their plan didn't build that in. It was all about numbers and strict DSLs. Whereas I think sometimes as an organisation, we need to think a bit further outside the box. And it's not necessarily just about how many people you've got working in an environment, it's about which people you have working in the environment. And especially now with equality, diversity and inclusion, more than ever, I think forces need to be going about things differently and looking at the different approaches, because I think we're a little bit set in our ways with that. And this particular female who I represented, we had meetings with HR, getting them to understand what she needed from the organisation, and she was far from being obstructive. She was really flexible. We came up with a number of sort of like different sort of like options with regards to working hours and things, and we got there in the end. We did find her another role, but there was a lot of stress and anxiety attached to that, probably unnecessarily.
No, absolutely. And I think sometimes my experience, certainly when people raise concerns around flexible working, and it can be male or female, but sometimes they're labelled a troublemaker, which is grossly unfair, because the pressure that the individual is under, and they just sometimes want to be met halfway, don't they? But it looks like you've got a fantastic result there locally, and you raised a really interesting issue, which makes me wonder whether the gender inequality is often an outcome of an outdated working practice, and if so, what can we do together, both at a local, national level as a federation, to try and fix those issues?
I think we've got to continue to put those challenges in, haven't we? Where it's appropriate to do so. And when we are looking at sort of like restructuring, which we have to do quite often, don't we? Let's face it, because sometimes, we'll have to sort of like make sort of like cuts to certain areas and move staff around and things like that. But it's sort of like looking at the bigger picture. And I think as well, it's sort of like it's not just looking at sort of like everyone you've got in the organisation now. It's like the people that you're recruiting in the future. So I know some forces are going down the line of recruiting part-time officers, and I think that's definitely something that needs to be taken on board by all 43 forces nationally, because that's going to open up policing as a career to people, particularly females who possibly wouldn't have been able to consider it because they're not able to work full time. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be explored a lot more, but by other forces. And I think GMP are one of the forces that have advertised just recently for part-time officers, and I think that's a really good positive step in the right direction, and that's definitely going to encourage more females and other people, to consider policing as a career, which is what we need.
No, you're right, and if you look back 10 years, we have come at such a long way, but it's just feels not quickly enough. And I know I spoke to an officer recently, a female officer, who was desperate to be an advanced driver, but the car courses, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, very rigid, very fixed. Why can't we be flexible? And I think it's better in some forces than in others, and we're getting there. But it's people like you that make sure that challenge, and that leads me on nicely. The theme of International Women's Day is choose to challenge, and you've highlighted, Ceri, a number of things where you have challenged, and also what we need to do going forward. But what do we need to do as an organisation now to help our colleagues broader? I accept you've touched on the need to challenge, but what does that look like?
I think sort of like, as well as challenging, it's about sort of like making full use of the Equality Act and the different things that it offers to us. One of those is positive action support. Females are underrepresented in policing. They are in my sort of like force, North Wales. If we're to be representative of the communities that we serve, we need pretty much a 50-50 split in our organisation. And even though we have made good progress there's still progress to be made. And, once you're in the organisation, females, once you start going up through the ranks, I think in pretty much every force, that sort of like representation of females starts dropping off. Because you do have to make sort of like decisions, if you're choosing to have a family as well, and the expectations from the organisation, that becomes very, very difficult if you choose to go sort of like further up the career path, if you like, because of the expectations around roles. So I think positive action support is something that definitely needs to be exploited more throughout forces, and supported. And that's sort of like, encouraging people to apply for roles, giving them guidance and support. A lot of roles are male dominated, especially sort of like specialised roles and things like that. So I think it's really important that we sort of like use things like that to the best of our abilities, in supporting females and giving them confidence to sort of like apply for different things and go for promotion.
Absolutely. And it's also about making role models of female colleagues. So I often use this. So my tutor many years ago, Sergeant Jane Watts, a brilliant inspirational officer, and in fact when she tutored me, she only had just over 2 years service, and she made me the officer that I am. Still friends to this day. Really good inspirational person, and the fact that she was a female officer meant that she had to be better than others. I'm talking 28 odd years ago. My chief and my deputy chief constables, role models to many people. I just think we need more of that within policing. And you said it earlier, Ceri, not a tick box. People promoted in places because they deserve to be there. But the fact that they're females, that inspires many people for many different reasons, both female and male.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's sort of like it's changing some of that culture that exists, isn't it? Where it's so easy, and it really makes me mad when people say, oh, she got that because she's female. Well, no, actually, she's got it because she deserves to get it. She's worked hard, and she's got that credibility. We've had our first sort of chief officer in North Wales, haven't we, with our ACC, Sasha Hatchett. you know, who started off in North Wales as a PC, which is really good. You know, there's other females sort of like coming up through the ranks, so we're getting there, but it's really slow progress, to be honest. And like you say, we should have made more progress really than what we have done, but we are headed in the right direction, which is good. So you've got to take the positives from it. And I think as well, you know, the federation here in North Wales, we work quite closely with the Gender Equality Network as well. So I think it's important for us that as a federation, you know, to be involved in sort of like other sort of like staff support networks as well. Because we're quite often putting in the same challenges, aren't we, about different things, you know, reasonable adjustments for staff as well. You know, it's quite important, I think, especially, you know, around disability and stuff. You know, people can be police officers who have disabilities as long as they can fulfil the role of a PC, can't they? You know, so it's making sure that we've got things in place that support that. You know, fair passport schemes. I saw that Hawe is doing something in relation to sort of, is it a wellness passport? I think she's calling it. So, you know, that's a really good example of that, isn't it? You know, where an officer shouldn't have to have the same conversation with a different supervisor every time that they move roles or they get deployed somewhere. You know, if they've got sort of what Hayley's talking about, sort of like the wellness passport, we've got something similar here called the fair passport, then it's things like that we need to make sure that the force are using. And that, you know, HR have got the proper training in and things like that. So that's something else that sort of like I'm involved in as well. And I've had the support sort of like in North Wales here from our disability support network and sort of like trying to progress that as well, you know, in our diversity unit. So there's loads of different areas that we can get into to sort of like bring the agenda on, you know, with sort of like getting more representation, you know, and supporting everyone really.
And I think I'll finish on this, if I may, Ceri. You've summed it up beautifully, because when we talk about, you know, the theme is choose to challenge, and the federation will challenge, take legal action if we have to. But if we can avoid that, then we should. And it's about accepting that we can't do all of this on our own. We can't work in isolation. And whether that's with other staff networks, you absolutely hit the nail on the head, but also working constructively with the forces. Yes, there will be times where we'll fall out and we'll have to draw a line and say, no, we're going to have to take action on this. But if we can avoid it through working together, then surely that's in the interest not only of our members, but more important to us than anyone, but also for policing in general. So,
and that's what you're taught, isn't it? As a police officer, communication is key, and that is exactly the case being a Fed rep as well. You know, it's about communicating and negotiating, isn't it? And sometimes it might be that you go and have a chat with somebody and put forward sort of like a member's perspective on something, like, well, actually, I hadn't thought about it like that. So it's just sort of like being alive to that. And sometimes, like you say, just sort of like an informal sort of like chat about things will resolve things without the need to take things more formally, because it's as simple as that sometimes, just bringing something to someone's attention, telling them what the potential issues are and the pitfalls, you know, and then sometimes it negates sort of like anything formal having to be done.
No, you're absolutely spot on. I'm really grateful, first of all, for you taking the time out to do this. And also, I know that you're juggling a busy daytime job. You're a mom, you're a Fed rep, you're our equality lead, pretty good at multitasking. But a massive thank you from me, Ceri, for everything that you're doing and the difference that you're making. It really does mean an awful lot. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.